All right, so we're recording. I'm gonna start and kick us off by just saying hello, that my name is Sabrina, and I'm one of the group admins here for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program Support Group, which is a long name on Facebook. We've got a ton of members here, and I am really excited to be talking to y'all a little bit today in video form, which is kind of unique for us. And one of our partners, Dan, who is a researcher. And we've been a subject of his research in the past as this Facebook group and the many different types of issues that borrowers in the group have had. So we're going to talk a little bit about Dan's current research and we're going to talk about how you can participate. And we're also going to offer y'all a couple of reminders about how to take care of yourselves in chaotic times. So I'm going to allow my friend Dan to introduce himself here.
Hey everyone, my name's Dan Collier, Daniel Collier if you want to find my work, I guess, because I go with my full government name on that one. I'm a researcher at the University of Memphis, and I do work on student loan debt. Specifically, I do work on trying to figure out who's in income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness, and what it looks like, what your lives look like while repaying these debts. And we focus on finances, your financial behaviors, what finances you do actually have access to, credit, and your subjective well-being. Like, how do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about your job? And other things correlated with subjective well-being. So, yeah, Sabrina and I talked about what this would look like. I don't know if I'm jumping the gun, Sabrina, but
No, go for it.
it's more of a chill conversation, not so much a presentation for me to give to you all, but we're going to talk about a lot of the findings that I have from the first round of data collection, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the findings that I have recently found in the second round, and then potentially uh, try to get some of you all more involved in the research that I have going on, because I would like some more a larger sample size so we can be more confident in some of the things that exist in these surveys. So yes, I think I did jump the gun though, but that's where we're at.
All right. Hey, man, we're doing it. I think it's all good. We're wanting to talk about this subject because, like Dan said, he is researching stuff that we know really matters to student loan borrowers in general and things that we hope will have impact over time. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit maybe about like why did you even choose to study this subject to begin with? What did it mean to you, and kind of like what do you hope that doing research on this subject will mean for the world?
Yeah, so I started looking at student loan borrowers for my dissertation back in 20, oh crap, 14 was the start of it and whatnot. Do not read my dissertation; it's absolute junk. I saved the good data for the publications, which I needed to get my job. So. That was my first round of surveying borrowers, and the survey was really long, but I had a lot of money from my a mentor to entice individuals to get into the survey and do a bunch of stuff. And from that survey, I learned that some things were more important than others, right? And asking the right questions were a little bit on certain things that we weren't asking the right questions about mattered more to policymakers as well. So as time has progressed, I have used both national data sets, well, actually, not just both, all three, national data sets, credit report data, and surveys in even qualitative interviews from borrowers to help policymakers understand, one, who is an income-driven repayment, which includes all of you, right? But two, what does forgiveness look like for those of you in public service loan forgiveness? What does it mean? How do you operate? How does that affect you mentally and whatnot? And the reason why I got into this is because I too have student loan debt. I too am in public service loan forgiveness. So I noticed gaps in the way that some people at some places, like think tanks, where maybe these individuals do not have the similar amount of loan debt that some of us otherwise would have had, were talking about this in ways that they had no idea what the fuck they were talking about. So, and then I started thinking, like, why does that exist? And it exists because most people in those places come from elite families with affluent, backgrounds. They go to Ivy League schools, and it's not to say that going to Ivy League school is bad. It's obviously not. It's where I would love my future. child to go to, because the benefits to that are high. But those people should not be talking for the rest of us in the ways that they get to talk to for the rest of us. And so I wanted to open that up and interject my voice into it. And as you can tell, my voice isn't exactly as prim and proper as all of them. And I've been fortunate enough to both develop the academic pieces of it, to have partners like you all, like the administrators of this group, but also protect borrowers and now the Lumina Foundation to elevate my voice, but also have the political, it's not capital, capital's not the right word because I don't have any political capital, but the political backing to a degree to get into spaces that normally somebody like me at the University of Memphis would never really get into. Like my first round of research on public service loan forgiveness and earlier rounds of research on income-driven repayment have been circulated within the Biden administration back whenever that was a thing and was part of the foundation, not the seminal part. There's no such thing as the seminal part. There was a lot of studies and a lot of views that went into this, but part of the Biden's foundation to provide student loan debt um, forgiveness and the SAVE program, which unfortunately did not go very far. But I'm proud that it was part of that, and it was very hopeful at the time that things would have worked out.
Mhm. So you're a student loan borrower yourself. You've seen the challenges in the system yourself. You've seen through the group and through hearing other people's experiences that the challenges are widespread, and you wanted to make sure that there was representation of those different experiences in terms of what people were able to look at and see and understand about the borrower experience. Sounds like a lot of your focus is on just making sure that those things are represented accurately and that we've got that information available so that the people who make decisions have that information to use to make decisions. And of course, crossing our fingers that the people who make decisions are actually using that information to make decisions, both in the current and hopefully in the future. So, great opportunity for folks to get involved in some way.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't have much hope for the current, but I am
Yeah.
gearing up for a future beyond this administration that will be helpful and will be receptive to this information, even if they don't like it. And one of the things that exists in the work are there's some things I was not expecting, and I'm very honest about that. And that's not, the common narrative that people who would champion some of these programs would suggest they would want. Like there's job satisfaction itself is not tied to public service loan forgiveness, and some people believe that that should be the case, but it's not the case, and that's okay. Like to me, that's a positive thing because
Yeah.
the people we previously surveyed love their jobs regardless of public service loan forgiveness. Now there are issues with golden handcuffs, and there are issues with staying in certain jobs that they otherwise would try to leave or progress into a different job in the same field, but feel trapped because maybe they might lose counts or maybe they might lose public service loan forgiveness. But there are aspects in the work that were, I would have thought that these things would have mattered. And it matters to certain activists and it matters to certain policymakers, but I've had to tell them, no, that doesn't seem to be the case as far as what we know so far. So there's that, but I can frame it differently than say random person from random right-wing think tank would want to frame it.
And your work has focused on understanding people's stories and what it is that their experiences actually looked like holistically, I know. So that, to the point that you're making of like, it's not just data points, there's like reasoning behind why the data points often look the way that they look. And that's the story that you're telling. So just because it's one of my favorite pieces of your research, I wonder if you would maybe just quickly touch on the research that you did about online communities as spaces for folks to get information, because I know a lot of our members were spotlighted in that.
Yeah, so earlier on, when we were doing interviews, we did not think to ask about online communities, but one of the members of actually this group, but also another member of the Reddit threads, both they both had in-depth stories about what the groups meant to them and how there was community there, and how there was a sense of belonging. There's a paper called Informing Trust that I have. It's just a policy paper. It's not a full-blown academic paper that I wrote with the or for the Protect Borrowers, or which used to be the Student Borrower Protection Center. Um, and it really highlights the community that exists there. So first of all, these communities build trust, right? And these communities build trust because the administrators have built that trust intentionally. They don't just repost whatever they find online the minute of, like Trump says he's taking public service loan forgiveness away from Chicago, let's think, which I do believe is a possibility in the future. Just going to throw that out there, but
But I'm sure that headline has already existed and we just didn't repost it right away.
no, it hasn't yet. It hasn't yet, but I've been getting more media inquiries about like where I think this is heading, and I've told them that I think that liberal cities are probably a target in the future for the new framework that they're proposing. Anyways, um, you all don't just retweet or repost whatever you find, you give it some time. And I know that early, and I'm part of the group, and I get a lot of information from the group actually, because I study this, but I don't study like the legal speak of it, right? And so sometimes I even look at it, and despite actually having the credentialing of being a paralegal, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? What do you want from us? And that seems to be a very common belief around amongst or sentiment amongst a lot of people because you have to sit down and really think about what's going on. It's been really messy since the end of the Biden administration too. So nobody seems to know what's going on because SAVE is still paused on hold. They've slow walked that. I mean, it's amazing how many court cases have gotten in front of the courts within weeks, and all of a sudden we're what over a year, well over a year above this, with this
Sitting.
and stasis, and anybody that's in it not getting anything counted. So within the group, we do find trust because the administrators have that trust, right? We find that people do not trust their servicers or the government on average. It doesn't mean everybody doesn't, but there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of unclear information that allow people to make up their own assumptions about things too. That's not helpful, and I've been there myself as well. But the other thing is the really important thing is there's community. There's a sense of belonging. I believe it was you and I that were talking about, was it in the podcast or just randomly, the recently? But the sense of belonging exists because there's people that don't have student loan debt or they once had student loan debt, but it was a marginal amount of student loan debt and they were able to pay it back on traditional repayment, which normally is a good deal for those people that can do that, right? But there's a lack of understanding of how harmful this debt is to individuals' finances,
Mhm.
but more importantly than their finances, even are their psyches and their social relationships and their jobs and how they feel boxed in and everything. And even people's parents and siblings and wider family members do not comprehend this. And from the borrowers I've talked to, and I don't know if this seems to be the case for everybody, there just seems to be community in these groups that allow them to be able to speak in a way where they don't feel attacked about it and they can be understood that what their life situations are, what's going on with them, and feel comfort in this where they cannot on the wider outside group or world.
Totally. And being a student loan borrower is super common. However, the specific struggles around public service loan forgiveness, around IDR, around being a public servant while having student loans. I mean, I hope and we hope as the group that people are finding that community here and are able to support one another. And like you said, we work really hard to make sure that we're kind of translating it because to your point, even as folks that are super involved and paying attention along the way, it can still be hard sometimes because it does feel like it's a different language. And so we try to make that accessible. And for I think 100% of the folks who have ever been moderators or admins in the group, it's because we've all had our own student loan debt or have, in my case, our own student loan debt and are pursuing this and know the struggles ourselves. And so I do think there's something kind of special and magic about the opportunity to connect with people who've experienced something that you've experienced. So
And
you're capturing that in your research. You are trying to give some elevation to the voices of those folks, even when there's stigma and even when they're not necessarily comfortable with being the mouthpiece for that themselves. What are some of the key things that you're hoping to learn about in this survey that you're asking folks to participate in?
Well, can we talk about the original one first, and then move on to the new one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So, so in the original survey, we found that the two concepts, especially with, I mean, the original survey was just public service loan forgiveness borrowers, by the way, and it
Hmm.
was done within the time frame of the pause, the student loan debt pause. So we did not collect individuals' monthly repayment obligations because at that point, most of you would have remembered what that was look like, what that looked like before COVID, and that did not affect your lives in that moment. Now, because that was years ago.
Hmm.
So one of the questions I kept getting from policymakers and my economist friends were, how do balances and getting closer to forgiveness relate to how people feel about themselves, subjective well-being, and their financial distress? And the answer is interesting because in IDR, as most of you know, your balances will likely go up. I mean, about 80% of all balances in IDR are going up because you just don't pay enough per month to make it go down. So you have this baseline stress on depending on where you're at based on your balance, but it never goes down. And for most of it, it goes up. So you're always getting stressed over that because it climbs. Even if you were to take a different job, it's all, I mean, a lot of people, and the next jump from one job to another is about 20 or 15 to $20,000 more, which is a lot of money. But when your balances have started railing out of control, it's actually not that much in your minds,
Hmm.
right? Because that's a stress grows. However, as you get closer to forgiveness, that distress goes down. Every year, that distress goes down by about the same amount that the balances go up by about 20 to 30 grand. So it's sort of offsetting to a degree, but you always have this baseline where you started at least for the balances. So it doesn't really offset, if that makes sense, right? When you get to forgiveness, boom, a lot of stuff happens. Like very happy about it. It's euphoria. I have a lot of interviews of people saying this is the greatest thing ever. All these other issues exist. Your credit score goes up. A lot you can say there are people able to save for the first time in their 40s.
Hmm.
Um, and there's just so many things that exist that lower your distress, that lower your financial stress, and which also lowers your psychological distress and then lowers your chances at thinking about suicide, right? And that's one thing that we found that people think about suicide and it is related to your student loan debt, but it's not only because of your student loan debt, because your student loan debt have these other issues, but you have this whole financial issue that these play into, and it's all of it together
Hmm.
that correlates with that. So when I've told my policymaker friends and my economist friends, this is a mechanism within this larger gatekeeping mechanism, we can't control how long it takes somebody to pay off their debt in 10 years. That's gatekeep, like that's time key,
Hmm.
gate kept, unless we change the parameters, which would be nice, but I don't think they're going to do that right now. We can control how their balances grow on them. And I will say, I've said this in several interviews. I'm not a big fan of the RAP program, but one of the things that the RAP program gets right is they are starting to control the negative amortization on
Yeah.
people, even though in many ways it's a bad deal for people. For those borrowers that already have loan debts, that's not controlling much. Like where you're at is where you're at. If you're on RAP, that's where you're at. They're not going to reduce it back to your original balance, which is a shame. They should, because there's no point in this anymore. But for new borrowers, despite the rest of the framework not being great, that is going to be extremely beneficial to people in their mental makeup because then
Hmm.
all they need to do is focus on those years to forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of times what really resonates with me about the work that I've heard you talk about is that I feel like I've seen it so much in our group. Um, people are stressed, and truly it is oftentimes something that feels even more stressful because of the challenge of really like understanding what you need to do. So, I mean, I know that your research has some of the preliminary results of what you've been working on so far has shown that maybe it's a little bit worse than we thought, given that over these last couple of years, I mean, people are wondering whether or not PSLF will even exist by the time that they get there. For the record, we don't necessarily think that it's going anywhere. I mean, it's probably here to stay. But the possibilities are endless, and it does feel like student loan borrowers are usually getting the short end of the stick or the short straw out of the situation in terms of how things have been going these last couple of years. So I would even wager to say that while it's typical to see that like comfort increase, your maybe mental well-being is increasing as you're getting closer to forgiveness. That probably was true more in the past than it is right now, because we've got a lot of folks who are real close who have been trying to figure out how buyback works and all of those
Hmm.
sorts of things. So
Hmm.
it's been extra tough. So that's a lot of what you've seen so far, and part of what made you want to do this kind of broader survey with more people involved. You are hoping to learn about how those things impact their mental health, their well-being, their options as people, like financially, as well as kind of what they can choose to do in terms of their jobs. I know you've also asked questions about like what do they hope for their own kids and for their loved ones in terms of their educational attainment and things like that. Anything else that you want folks to know that you're looking for in this survey that you're looking for participants for?
Yeah, so do you want to talk a little bit about the initial findings of Wave 2 then?
Up to you if you want to share.
Sure. Real quickly, Wave 1, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. For those of you who are waiting on a forgiveness decision, that means you've turned in everything for the government, the government's and the servicers are trying to get back at you. I understand there's a lot of uncertainty for you all. When I think about suicidal ideation from the first wave, about 18% of the sample said that they had any suicidal ideation any days of the week, which is elevated above the national average by a magnitude of 2 to 3 times. It's not great, but those of you who are waiting for forgiveness decision are the most distressed and psychologically distressed. And that psychological distress manifests in about 50% of individuals report in that group reporting that they experience a suicidal thought at least once per week at
Wow.
any time. That is ungodly high.
Yeah.
And we that is a group that I've told y'all about as well, to focus on. I've told many policymakers that that group needs help, and part of that is because your paperwork needs to be filled out more quickly by them, not you. Obviously, they need to give you an answer more quickly than not. And I know that there's a lot of uncertainty about how quickly that's happening now, too. So I just wanted to speak to you all, in that we notice you're a unique group within the sample that has already got high ideation. And if you need any help, please go talk to people, whoever that is. And I know that Sabrina's going to talk more about that later at the end here of who you can go find help with. But know that we know that as a group, there's something unique about you all, and the people I've talked to in that group have suggested it's because of the uncertainty. It's because of, am I going to get this? When am I going to get this? Are they going to take it back after they give
Right.
it? Those are the three main concerns. And so please get help. Please talk if you need to talk to somebody. With that said, yeah, we can go through a few things here. I guess if we're talking about suicidal ideation now, in Wave 2, which is supported by the Lumina Foundation, I can't thank them enough for the support that they've given me and the support that MDC has given me and Protect Borrowers and whatnot. We have a sample size of about 2,000 people right now, and it would be great to have thousands more so we can be more certain on these things. Um, so in Wave 1, we sort of hid suicidal ideation within a matrix of other behaviors like, do you go see family? Do you take recreational drugs, stuff like that, because I didn't want it to be a focus of the sample, but I wanted to know more about it. It was my personal focus, but I didn't want it to be the focus for you all as you were taking the survey. We've changed that. Now we are talking about food security. We're talking about what would be technically darker concepts than I originally wanted to, but we found that darker concepts were a little bit more important to policymakers right now. They don't want to know if you're good with your friends and how many times you visit with them. They don't care about how many times you visit with family. They want to know about food security. They want to know about self-harm. and they want to know about things that they can do potentially do about it. Whether they do it or not, that's a different story, but they want to know this information. So on wave two, we took out we started asking if people had self-harm thoughts and then suicidal thoughts differently. So about 19% of the sample had self-harm thoughts, and self-harm could be like cutting and other behaviors aligned with that. Suicidal thoughts are thoughts of killing oneself. So about 19%, and actually I'll just share this because this might be helpful to see. Can you see the,
Yes.
all right. So nine, can you see it well, or do I need to expand it?
Maybe zoom in just a little bit.
How about now? Full screen?
Uh, I don't think it's showing the full screen. Still
Oh,
on like the PowerPoint screen.
okay. Sorry, everyone.
Hey, this is if they've been in a Zoom meeting, they've done this one before.
Okay, can you see it better?
Yes.
All right, so 19% of the sample suggests that they have any self-harm, they think about self-harm at least once per week. 20% think about suicide. On average, those who report any self-harm thoughts think about it almost 2.5 days per week. Suicidal thoughts are closer to 3 days per week. Um, we then ask people, are you making plans? And did you make any attempts? And so 27% of the people who said, yes, I have thought about this, have made plans. 10% have made attempts, which is a very high percentage.
Hmm.
Even worse, 37% of people have made plans, and 13 have um, made attempts. So that means there's a lot of people out there making attempts, and obviously somebody's going to be successful at it, right? So, and we don't differentiate between true attempts in attempting to attempt, right? Because there are issues with that, I believe, in how you would ask somebody that kind of stuff. So attempts are attempts, and we're gonna assign an intent with that in this work. So there are a lot of people here that so far are trying to harm themselves in various ways. And not everybody agrees that that's because of their student loan debt, but more than half the sample say student loan debt plays a role in this. But it's again this wider financial distress issue that exists that these issues play into and become this larger construct. So, that it's just something to be aware of, and it's getting worse over time. So from January to May 22nd, we collected data, and then we started a new version of the survey because we had a DDoS attack and had to shut down the first survey. And then
Wow.
we started collecting the second part of the data. And it's getting worse over time. Um, and then, oh, here we go. That was the next slide, actually. So part one from January to May 22nd, or 14% had self-harm thoughts. From then on till now, 23%, again, 19 to 27 on suicidal thoughts. Serious mental distress. So we use the Kessler scale and we just do serious mental distress. It's 26 to 36. And then food security. So low food security, it's 20 to 26%. We see all these negative attributes rising, and that is probably because of the way that the wider financial behavior, or wider economic conditions exist within with the bad tariff policy amongst other things. And I assume that because of the recent behavior of the president and other policies like sending people to Chicago and shit like that, it's probably we're all of this stuff, maybe minus food security, is probably going to be a lot worse. Uh, and then on top of the student loan debt issues, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of things going on right now that that I cannot control for in any survey whatsoever because we could never have predicted this to this degree. Like we had ideas, right?
Right.
Um, the other thing that I want to bring out over the course of time, trust in the servicers and the federal government has declined. within the survey, again, from January to May 22nd and from May 23rd on. So trust in servicer, so you trust your current, you have trust in what your current servicers are telling you to do the right things. That's only 17%. So it's agree and strongly agree. Trust for clarity from servicers, again, 20%, and federal government's lower. Uncertainty and confusion when repaying your student loans is 64%. But in part two, so the newer wave of the second round of data, it's actually 84%.
Wow.
It's ridiculously high. So we are seeing a lot of really unfortunate issues manifesting, at least in the data that we have already collected.
Hmm.
Um, so do you want to unpack any of that?
I mean, it's a lot to unpack, but I mean, part of my early career was working around suicide prevention work, and I guess what it means to me when I look at it is just that I we see one version of the suffering and the challenges that people are running into when we're looking at the group and like all the different questions that are coming through and how challenging it is to get answers from your servicer or from FSA or wherever it is that you're going to, and that the answers are changing as time goes on. So we see one version of the challenge, and then people are really dealing with a whole other level of suffering underneath that,
Mhm.
that's mixed up in all these other things that are true about the world. But these things are not helping. The student loans are not helping, the confusion around this. And I know from experience and from hearing it from other people's experiences that this is a big one. For some people, this is some of the biggest debt they ever carry. For some people, it is debt that they've had as far back as they can remember being an adult. And it is something that feels inescapable for a lot of folks. So PSLF is really a lifeline to get out from under amounts of money that they're not sure they'll ever even see in their lifetimes. And so I'm sure I know from experience again that just feeling alone in that and feeling hopeless and like there's not a way out, people will consider all sorts of things. And we've got to start addressing that as a country and as a group.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to talk about real quickly is this sample. The average age is 42. Like
Hmm.
these are not younger individuals where these things would be higher early career because they're not making quite as much money. On average, the individuals in the sample are making good money, but they may not always be making money that is above or at the cost of living for maybe their zip codes and stuff like that.
Right.
And so that's another narrative that I consistently talk about with my economist friends and my policymakers, and that, yeah, some of you could be earning $90,000 as an individual, and that's nice. $90,000 is a good salary, but if you're earning $90,000 in a zip code where, like, say, in New Jersey, median household or median income is $169,000. Well, great. You're not doing as well as the average person in that zip code. And that needs to be considered, like cost of living measures need to be considered by researchers when we think about developing these policies and think about how good, how well borrowers are living. And another thing that I want to point out is that majority of the sample are not living, when they rent apartments, they actually are below the median rental for their zip codes. And
Hmm.
when they buy houses, their mortgages are below, or I'm sorry, their mortgages are below median household mortgages. So it's not like these individuals are above, but they should be because they have master's degrees and the average American does not. So there's the average American in these zip codes are better off in many with along many parameters than would be those in public service loan forgiveness in these samples.
And just based on you saying that just now, is it correct to assume or to draw the conclusion that what you're seeing in terms of what people are spending on other things does not indicate that people are being irresponsible as a general rule when it comes to their financial decisions? I think that's one of the common myths is like that if you're responsible, then you'll be able to just pay it off and it'll be easy. But it sounds like folks are generally they're keeping it within their income. They're trying to pick reasonable mortgages, apartments that they're renting, et cetera, and so forth. Is that fair to
That seems to be
assume?
the case. But one thing that also exists for a lot of these individuals is while they might have higher, also relatively high pay, right? They also have that loan debt, and that means that the percentage points of their credit cards, of their cars, and their houses will be higher than somebody else, right? So yes, they're making those decisions, but also probably paying a little bit more for a lesser house comparatively.
Yeah. So it's got this kind of like impact all over your financial health, in terms of what
Yeah.
decisions you can and can't make, the flexibilities that you have. And we know how foundational that is to how you feel about your world and your life.
Yeah,
Um,
one of the things with the credit panel data that we have, we don't know who's in income-driven repayment. We don't know who's in public service loan forgiveness, but we can make fair assumptions of who is in income-driven repayment, and that's what we're working on with Protect Borrowers right now.
mhm.
The pause was outstanding for credit scores
Yeah.
because for a while there a bunch of things were ignored, right? And so unfortunately now, and it also really helped that the interest rates were super low.
Yeah.
So those who were able to get in got in and are living a decently well life because things are cheaper on average than getting in now, right? But since the pause has been lifted, we're just seeing credit scores tanking. We're seeing credit card debt go up and usage go up, and amongst people in income-driven repayments, we believe amongst people who we believe are in income-driven repayment. It's a fair way
Hmm.
to frame that. And you know, car default rates right now are climbing, but not default of anything else. But that's also just all, especially more recently, indicative of the ridiculous policies we've decided to enact as a country for some reason.
Hmm. So I mean, impacts are showing up in a really measurable way, when we're looking at credit scores, and we all know, I'm sure, how that changes what you get offered when you need to get to the counter to make some of those financial decisions.
Yeah,
Um,
it's going to be
so
much harder for people that don't have assets right now to get assets.
yeah. Are there any kind of final thoughts that you want to talk about in terms of the research and findings that you've had so far before you share a little bit about how people can get involved now?
Yeah, so one of the other things, let's see here. These are just brand new. I ran them earlier in the week because we're gonna create a blog with Protect Borrowers that will be out soon. And they're just
Okay.
some things that I want to show. And really, I just want to show what the value of public service loan forgiveness is beyond financial value. And so we looked at it's similar data as to or it's the same sample as what I talked about earlier, but then we looked at it by people who are currently in repayment, in income-driven repayment or public service loan forgiveness through income-driven repayment, those who are in the safe forbearance, those who are waiting on forgiveness, whoops, and those who are forgiven already through public service loan forgiveness. Now we have
Wow.
two other groups that there were not very much sample size of, like those who already paid off their loans while in IDR and those who had IDR forgiveness, but there's not enough to report there.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out what forgiveness is worth. And forgiveness is worth going back closer to the national average of thinking about suicide. This is still pretty high,
Hmm.
but this is a much 91 point or almost 92% of people saying that I don't think about suicide at all at 0 days is much better than 70s, right?
Hmm.
And again, waiting on forgiveness individuals, even in the new sample, this is
Yeah.
it's not quite as high as the original sample, but we also have a lower sample size of this by a couple hundred. So who knows what that looks like when it comes out, or when we can bolster it. But this is still a sizable chunk here of individuals. Almost 40% of individuals are thinking about suicide at least once per week.
Wow.
Um, and then when we think about intensity of how many days per week, right? You got about 21% of those waiting on a forgiveness decision thinking about it at least 5 days a week or five
Wow.
days a week. So there's intensity in this as well. Um, let's see here. What's the other one? Non-suicidal self-harming plans. Um, we have again those in repayment. Um, and these are of the people who thought about suicide. So this is a much smaller group or self-harm. This is only still like I think it was like 5% of individuals that had non-suicidal self-harm. This is a much smaller number than the rest of these. So this looks out of whack here. But the waiting on forgiveness individuals, again, only plans, no attempts, which was good to see. But then you see these people in repayment, which again, these are these are people affected right now by
Mhm.
the potential of wage garnishment and other issues. So we're seeing it go up here. And then suicidal self-harming plans again. Here we go. This is these two groups here. Waiting on forgiveness has the most uncertainty. In repayment has the second most uncertainty. People in save right now are pretty certain that they can stay in save for a little bit longer, so they're not quite there yet as they try to make what decisions they need to make in the upcoming year, right? So we're seeing large chunks of people who have said they thought about suicide and are either making plans, and especially with the waiting on forgiveness individuals, have made attempts. 22% of individuals have made attempts.
Well, and it's just
So,
really concerning to see the plans too, because as someone
yes,
who has kind of who's worked in that space before, the thought of suicide is concerning in and of itself, but you really start to think about like measures that you need to take to protect people when they start talking about having a plan. So having a plan is a really serious thing. It shows that you've taken that next step in terms of thinking about how it would actually happen. And that's when, you really gotta get some support and some help.
yes, absolutely. I keep pointing these things out more than like the nicer things. I'm going to talk about a few nice things real quickly,
Sure.
because I'm worried about individuals. I mean, part of the reason why I think about self-harm and suicide is because I had a stepbrother that killed himself. And I know that pain from a person that lived on, obviously, with somebody who had done that. And I've always thought, like, I know the answers now, but as an 8-year-old, and he was 10 years older than me, I never knew why he did that
Right.
and why what that was about, and those answers or those questions plagued me for years. And now as an adult I know about it, and it's like what could have I mean, as a kid I could have done nothing, but what can we do to help people move away from that kind of
Yeah.
that thinking, even though it is persistent and it's part of their lives. Um so I do want to talk about a few nice things real quickly, then we'll
Yeah.
talk. So on average, people really believe that college was worth it for them, though, still, regardless of what payment they're in. Although, after you get forgiven, that really goes up. Like the agree and strongly agree really goes up. So you have time to reflect upon the process. And even though the process might have been absolute shit, especially for these early people that were forgiven, right? Um, it starts it's there's something that switches for forgiven people that go, all right, you know what, this was worth it because there's other things in life that are related with college that make it worth it. It's just hard to get there, right?
Right.
Again, college has been important to my life. Overwhelmingly, most people agreed that that was true, even regardless of what payment you were in. But when you get to forgiveness, it becomes much more important to your life. Um, And then one interesting thing. So I know that there's this idea that people with 4-year degrees shit on the trades, or at least 4-year degrees. And I've never believed in that, both having been in the trades, former mechanic before I went to school. I got kicked out of community college first time around, went back at 24. And in that time I worked as a blue collared working person, right? And I keep hearing people saying, "Well, everybody shits on the trades," and I've never actually engaged in anybody except for those from elite families who actually do. And the answer is, it doesn't seem like at least this group does. And this again, this sample's about average age is about 43. Average degree is a master's degree. it seems like the trade certificate's really important because it's the second most cited degree that they think that they should have their kids or close family members should have for
Mhm.
financial security. So in my opinion, that's a great thing, and that's something that I've already with policymakers about. In that these are fair pathways, and people with 4-year plus degrees, on average, want to see these things for their children. Obviously, they want to see more so the bachelor's degree because that brings different advantages, and we know that that's clear. That's always been clear, and it's easily identifiable. But it's not like anybody's actually shitting on these degrees here, and it's a positive thing in the eyes of these individuals, and that's a great thing for us.
Well, and
Uh,
you said the average age is 43, so it's not even hypothetical for a lot of the people that are answering this question. It's a lot of people who are of the age where they might have their own kids. They're
yeah,
really thinking about real children that they have and saying, I would be proud and happy and grateful for the opportunity if my child had that.
yeah, and they value the trade certificate or degree over a master's degree and an associate's degree. And but we also know, like, once you get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree could provide some higher ROI, but it usually doesn't provide the same degree of ROI that a bachelor's degree would over it. So,
Right.
in associates, I was actually really surprised to see the associate's degree below a trade certificate. So it's actually a really encouraging outcome here, because as we talk about our community, and our community being those with student loan debt who are in income-driven repayment or public services loan forgiveness, depending on which communities you're in, um, part of the issue here is that nobody understands the community, right? This is why the group itself has been beneficial to a lot of people, as my work shows. So, trying to convey to other individuals who would use these communities as a cudgel against, like other policies, like why are we giving community colleges that only give associate's degree more money than we would community colleges that focus on, or CTE colleges, like career training colleges? And the answer is you can do both because both are valued.
People
So.
see a lot of pathways to success.
Yeah, and people with advanced degrees are not really are on board with all of these options here, as long as these options exist in a fair way to allow children and their families and young adults, or even older adults, and not to leave them out because there's a lot of borrowers that are older adults, right? The fair pathway to make the proper decision versus just be pathed into something. That's where I start to have a problem with things.
Mhm.
All right, I think we
Grateful
need.
for some good news. And I think I heard you starting to turn the corner into what you're hoping folks will do to participate in be one of these part of the voice.
Yeah, so I know you all will send out another round of participation with the link, and the link will give you access to the survey, and the survey has a password, and you have to put in repay. All that will be in the text. One of the things that I know that exists, a few concerns that some people have is how will my data be anonymized? How will I know? Well, I don't actually collect your names at all. You will give me a pseudonym that you choose. I will collect an email from you, so choose an email that, would be masked if you want. If not, it can be your regular email. A lot of people do that. And the only person that has access to those emails would be me, and it's stored on my university drives and stuff like that. Um, I will ask is people who engage. So there's two components here. There's a survey, and you can just take the survey and be done if you want to. It's okay. Or if you get halfway through the survey and you want to be done, that's okay too. You can stop whenever you want. It's fine. We do ask, as you probably would have gathered from our conversation, intimate questions about your finances. We ask you how much you make. We ask you about your student loan debt. We ask you about being married or whatnot. I mean, we don't get super in depth in all that, but we do ask you some baseline questions about these things. And then we do ask you about self-harm and food security and those behaviors and those issues. So just be aware that that is a large part of this survey moving forward. Now, the survey, if you have the information in front of you, takes on average about 10 to 12 minutes. It's only about 50 questions. and I'm not going to lie, the matrix questions are one question, so it's closer to 60 because there's a few matrix in there, but um a lot of those are gauging like how do you feel about college and what's the worth of things I just talked about.
Hmm.
I will never contact you beyond asking you to engage in work that, in the research. I leave space at the end of the survey for you to tell me things that maybe we missed or you want to know about in a text box, but we also ask if you want to engage in a interview with us. We have not started interviews. The data has been so interesting as the course of time has progressed that we are just holding off to interviews at the end till the end of the year or start of next year. If you want to do an interview with us, great. If you do not, that's okay too. We won't contact you about an interview ever again if you say no. The only things that we will contact you about is the incentives that we have if you happen to have won any of the incentives, or if you want to engage in future research. There have been people that have asked me in the past to take them out of the research sample after they agreed to engage in the research, and obviously we did because that's your right. Um, we do not talk about your names. The first round, we actually collected names. Nobody's names are part of that. I will ask for confirmation in the um, interviews if we can use video or if we can use audio, and you do not have to say yes to that. You can just say no, and that's the end of it. But I will be able to use your quotes that you give to me, and so like those will be posted in uh, research and potentially online, filtered through a natural processing, a language processing uh, program that allow me to put the quotes on a website so people can hear your quotes. And that exists already in some form on a website that Sabrina has access to that she can give a link to. Did I
So
cover everything that you thought would be?
I think so. I mean, to summarize what you just said, people can be as involved as they want in terms of the research when it comes to like survey versus interview. There's no requirement to do an interview if you participate in the survey. They can keep their name information anonymized. They can use a separate email address if they want to, all those things. And there's always an advisory on all the different pages about what you're agreeing to throughout the process. So folks will have multiple opportunities to kind of acknowledge and understand how their data will be used. Is that right?
There is a consent form in the very first part of the survey that details all that, but that's where you'll see that at. It's not on every page.
Well, okay, great. But at the very beginning, before they even put anything in, they'll have the opportunity to see exactly kind of all the details. And then it sounds like you'll ask them again when it gets to the interviews.
Yeah, yeah, we will reconfirm that they're interested in or that we are conducting the interview. We have permission to, and then again, if we can use it in ways that we hope to use it, and if we can't, that's perfectly fine. We could just do the interview.
Excellent. So I think
Um,
that was I know folks are always worried about how the information will be used. So thanks for clarifying that.
yeah, we're gonna, these early wave data. What I showed to you just now, like the second wave or the second part of the second wave of data. I get tongue-tied on that one often. I don't know about y'all, but ever since COVID, my brain has been a little bit slower than not. But we are using this already to inform policymakers about what's going on with student loan debt borrowers. I work with Protect Borrowers, and they work with a lot of policymakers like Elizabeth Warren and a few other individuals. And these are people that are very interested in this topic, and that's how a lot of the work originally got into their hands. And my own connections and my own efforts got in, so these are people that are interested in knowing what's going on with borrowers' financial and subjective well-being because they want to do something. They don't always get around to doing it. I'm not going to claim that always happens because we all know that right now, right? But at least there are some people at the moment that are trying to help. And I think that if we can find a new pathway forward with a different administration eventually, that this work would be well suited right away through with my friends and with my funders to get into hands more quickly than not to make some better informed decisions as we I guess the right word is dig out of this shithole.
Hmm. So if folks are looking for some way to make their voices heard, to weigh in, to potentially have an opportunity to influence decisions that get made in the future, this is one kind of simple and safe way for them to do so, and to kind of help as we learn more and more about who borrowers are and what they need.
Yeah, and I'm responsive to y'all when you email me. Like I have borrowers from the first wave still emailing me about what's going on in their lives and whatnot. So Um, I'm here to help. I'm not going to say that I'm completely altruistic. I'm not. This is part of my career. This is for me too. But it's both in tandem, and so I'm here to help as best I can too, especially with what I'm seeing in the data. And that
Mhm.
help is limited because I don't have resources to help in ways that I would love to help. I wish I was a billionaire and I could help in different ways, but my help really is just trying to get your stories told to individuals who might one day be able to affect this stuff.
So I'm maybe going to shift to just a couple of final caveats and resources. And then, like Dan said, when we post this video, we will make sure that you have all the links, all the different information and access in the post itself. So that way you can get to it. But if you want to take a screen grab, you're more than welcome to. Y'all know I'm always going to remind you as an administrator to take care of yourselves. So that's my first point that I want to make to everybody is that no matter what, most of your loan issues, I know that they can feel really big and really pressing, but most of them, even if they are urgent, most of them are not emergent. So remember, you don't have to rush too quickly or do something that you're not ready for. There are deadlines that exist, but most of the time there is an opportunity to reflect and feel okay about what it is that you're doing to move forward. Remember that your mental health and who you are and the person that you are matters so much more than the debt that you carry. And remember that you're not alone. Our group is huge. We've got more than 200,000 people who are going through the same thing that you're going through. And a huge proportion of those folks are active in this group. We've got a much higher active rate than most groups because we're here for each other. So remember that. And like I said, there's usually always time to step back if you're feeling overwhelmed. You've got support systems here in the group. You can feel free to reach out to us and to get some support and take your time with your loan situation. But if you are feeling some type of way, as many of us are, I know there are crisis hotlines that are available, including a crisis text line for you to reach out to if you're feeling suicidal, or even if you're not. A lot of times they want to talk to you before you get to that point. But especially if you are not quite at that point, but you want some support, warm lines are a great resource. There is a directory of those on the NAMI website, which again I'll link in the description. Breathing exercises, I know it feels corny, but I promise you, if you try it, you might be surprised by how helpful a breathing exercise can be if you're feeling really overwhelmed in a moment. And something I know I've talked about with Dan in the past is the stigma. Just remembering that this is not a nothing problem and that talking about this to the people in your life, to your existing support systems, to the people around you that at work, at home, at school, wherever it is that you are feeling supported, this is a real problem and it's worth talking about to the people who want to support you because they'll probably want to support you through this too. And you might be surprised who else has student debt. So, like I said, we'll make sure that all of the links for how to participate are in the description for this video, and we'll keep posting it around. And if y'all have questions, I know Dan said he's pretty responsive via email. I've maybe even seen him pretty responsive in comments in the group. So I know he's available to answer questions, and so are we.
And real quickly, I'm sorry, I just
Yeah.
want to wrap up with I just want to thank you all. I want to thank the administrators of the group for a few years ago being receptive to, hey, I'm part of the group. I know you don't know me and I don't know you, but here's the thing, and here's what I'm really trying to accomplish with this thing. And I know that our joint friends also helped with that as well. But I want to talk to the people in the group who are watching this. I thank you. A fair degree of individuals in that first round came from this group. And without your participation, there's a lot of things that I didn't even talk about that have had influence in how the Biden administration has behaved around public service loan forgiveness and interjecting trust into the system until they didn't. But at first, um, that exists, and it's because of you. Without your data, I could have never gotten those stories, this data into those places versus just sitting in the rooms with those individuals and be like, yeah, well, this is probably bad, right?
Mhm.
But your voices, your stories, especially your stories, those interview stories, have resonated with people and they still continue to. And I posted up some of the quotes in a website. And so again, without you, this wave two would have been just this research would have been dead on arrival. So I appreciate y'all. I really do.
Well,
And
we're grateful somebody's writing it all down, is all I gotta say. And not to be too cheesy or anything, but we are all in this together. This group is big enough that we can make change in this world. And one of the ways that we can do it is by contributing to efforts like this. So thanks so much, Dan. And thanks to all the group members who are watching this kind of unique thing that we're doing. But I hope you participate in the survey and we will talk to you soon.